We've been talking about finance and what can finance do for this transformation for a long time. So without further ado, Melíosa, Ruth, thank you very much.
Good morning, everybody. I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
Yeah, good. That's good. Well, it's very nice to be here this morning and great to see so many familiar faces. So thank you for listening to myself and Ruth. We don't have to do introductions because they're all well done by Thomas. Thank you. So first up, Ruth, tell us, did you grow up wanting to be a leader in sustainable finance? And tell us a little bit about yourself and why Generation Investment Management.
Okay, sure. Good morning, everyone. Lovely to be here. A real pleasure, and thank you for the invite. I find this question hilarious because I don't think anybody of my generation necessarily grew up wanting to be a sustainability leader. I think by contrast to that, my daughters and many others of this new generation most definitely want to be. I grew up, I didn't come from much, so really my priority, Melíosa, was to get some economic, stability. So that was my driving goal. I definitely was no tree hugger, I can tell you that. And more than that, my first 10 years were spent at Ford Motor Company. So I spent a lot of my career in the automotive sector, responsible for a large number of emissions, not that we were aware of it at the time. And I look back now and I think it's so fascinating that there's so many EVs rolling off the Ford manufacturing lines nowadays. And actually that period of my career, I spent probably 10 years in the UK doing every type of job at Ford and Ford Credit, which is the financing arm of Ford. And that came back later on as something that stuck out for me, which I'll come to shortly. I then, having spent a long time in the UK, wanted to come home, so moved back to Cork when I was having my two girls who are 18 and 16 now. And I can tell you the generation coming at us is fierce altogether, so that's great. And a happy accident led me into energy. So I started working with Bord Gáis. They were setting up a strategic unit to try and diversify out of just being gas and into electricity. And you could be cynical and say, sometimes it's the women that end up with the new thing, right? Mm-hmm. But definitely I was thrown this ball. We wanted to find some wind farms to complement the building of this CCGT that was going on. And so a happy accident, I ended up responsible for the renewable development at the time, working with a team. And the best fun ever around Ireland, talking to different farmers and all sorts of landowners to try and sign up people to this stuff. Windmills, what are you talking about? Yeah, you know? Yeah. And so did that. And I remember at the time there was a lot of cynicism around it. This was 20 years ago, roughly. And I remember fondly, actually, one of the older guys in the team who was a conventional generation person. I was asking for some engineering help. I'm not an engineer, I'm an accountant by training, by the way. And he said to me, what do I look like, the jolly green effing giant to you? You know? So we got there in the end anyway, and that was enormous fun. And I ended up, as part of the downturn, you may recall the IMF were in town and they sold Bord Gáis Energy to a consortium. One of the consortium was Brookfield Asset Management, a Canadian global asset manager, private equity owner. And I embraced that. And I think the theme in my career is if somebody asks me to do something, I generally try and help. And I remember them asking me, would you set up a European power marketing division? I had no idea what that meant. But I said I'd give it a go. And I went on to have an enormous, a really wonderful and successful career with Brookfield over the preceding, just the past 10 years. And I set that up. I also was CFO for their European business as it grew. And we ended up then buying a couple of listed entities out of New York. I headed up Terraform Global, a global energy renewable business. And we delisted that and grew the various regions, India, China, others. And I ended up as COO of their global energy business. And I had been doing that role for about 4 years when I had a phone call from Generation Investment who are a boutique firm versus the trillions of assets under management that Brookfield represents, but they are really mission driven and have been for 20 years. And so the business was founded 20 years ago by a chap called David Blood, who was the former head of Global Sachs Asset Management, and former Vice President Al Gore out of the US. And they really wanted to set up their own asset manager from scratch and to prove the sustainability thesis. And for over 20 years now, they have done so. They are committed. It is sustainable investing. It will always be sustainable investing and only sustainable investing. And also very driven towards a just transition. Yeah. And so those two pillars are at our core. And happily, we have a 20-year anniversary coming up in April, and our returns have exceeded any benchmark around the world that you could compare us to. So the thesis is proven. Sustainable investing is good for your wallet as well as good for the planet. And so I'll stop there because I know that's been a lot of words.
No, it's absolutely tremendous, and I can disclose to everybody that Northern Trust is very proud to have Generation Investment Management as our client. I will tell you, I first heard of you as the company run by Blood and Gore.
Blood and Gore, yes.
So just say it.
It's still funny.
But it's quite a tremendous story at Northern Trust. We're really proud of that association. And I suppose when I look, Generation Investment Management were doing what everybody's now trying. They were miles, just miles ahead, and still are, because if you watch them closely, they're always on the cutting edge of this whole journey. So
yes.
It's really
totally appreciate that. And I should say that 20 years ago they were pilloried for this. It wasn't an easy decision. No decisions like that are ever easy. There was a group of 5 founders, and they were called tree huggers. They were told they'd fail. This was a folly, but they were quite determined. Yeah,
really amazing. So tell me, and it's interesting, you talked there about having the financial, the commercial success coming with it as well.
Yes.
And I do obviously always go with the view that kind of money talks in a way.
Yes.
So what role, this is the piece I find fascinating. So I personally see obviously I'm in financial services, and between regulation and between people, one thing companies are generally good at is listening to their customers, and customers are looking for people looking to invest in ESG. But what can finance do? And very specifically, what can investment managers do to really lead the way on this and make that difference? Do you want to talk a little bit about, does that success? Tell us a little bit about how it happened.
Okay. Yeah. So it is very research-based, the approach that Generation take. And so when they founded the firm, they spent probably 3 years before they invested $1 or even longer, really focusing in on what does it mean? What does sustainability mean to all of us? It doesn't mean you go and invest in a bunch of renewables and nothing else, because there is a transition at hand here across multiple industries. And so there is a deep focus on what businesses need to be doing across multiple categories to be on the successful end of this transformation. And so that's where we spend a lot of time in terms of our strategies. But you raise a really good point that we've proven that thesis now, and I think most people would say sustainable investing is almost mainstream at this point, and our firm would like always to be pushing the agenda, pointing the way, and so we're mission driven. A lot of our time as we come into a 20th anniversary space is now spent on what does climate investing mean, what does edge investing mean, what is visionary today isn't what was visionary 20 years ago. Happily, a lot of mainstream capital and mainstream finance floods into renewables nowadays, right? So, a lot of what we see, there's 1.8 trillion, I think, went into renewables globally, or rather sustainability globally, in 2023, 1.6 in 2022. That number needs to grow. It needs to grow 5-fold if we were to meet some of the targets that we would love to meet. But so I guess we've unlocked that floodgate, to use a hydro terminology. But where we're thinking about now is there are edge technologies, there are other areas such as nature that need attention, and we're spending a lot of time developing a strategy to invest in nature, in agri, and also the technologies that will take that last harder piece of the decarbonisation economy and unlock it. So we're trying to market make. We've invested in green steel out of Northern Europe. We're looking at launching our first climate solutions fund in the nature space in the next 12 months, and we're very excited about that. We have a team from Brazil joining us, being an economy that is very much in that space already. So we're trying to find the new horizon, I guess, Melíosa, and there is no end of capital available.
Talk to me about investor demand. Where's the money coming from?
Okay.
I know that's...
Well, as we started the firm, there was a lot of private money came into our business, but we also have institutional partners like Californian teachers' pensions, some of the Canadian large pension funds, but our clients are all over the world. We have a lot of large institutions from Australia. It's coming from everywhere. I mean, there's pockets of it originally were coming from very mission-driven types of niche capital.
Yeah.
It is now broad-based.
That's what I was
Yeah. So, and I think there's a really interesting point here. There's a fiduciary duty around this, and so as we transition, there's no doubt in my mind, and it's a Chatham House rules, and this is a personal I kind of worry I have, is that some pensions will be left stranded here. Keep an eye on where your pensions are. And let's transform all of these asset classes so that they are fit for the future and that we don't have any stranded assets or pensioners sitting at the end of this transition.
Okay, I think that's a really, really interesting point, fascinating point. So another thing then, just to let's get something out of the way, okay, which is this kind of, I think there's two bits that sometimes get in the way. One is the kind of commercial short-termism, and it's the convincing people that actually it is only short-termism because, and then the other bit is kind of that politicization of the whole topic of ESG, which I know it's a complex area. Yeah. But can you talk to us a little bit about how to handle those?
Yeah. It's an easy, I would say to all the leaders in the room, and there's so many of you here today, it's very hard to grasp this nettle. And there is a lot, it's much easier for people to throw stones, I guess. And I am fierce in my defense of the transition and where we're going. It is an inevitability. 97% of the world's most eminent scientists in this space have coalesced on the fact that our activity is causing this. So in my mind, there's no question. And I think we have to be brave and speak up and not allow that politicization of this debate. And it's hard. So traversing what we need to do with all of the various acronyms and new things that are coming out around ESG is difficult, but we all have a responsibility to do it. And so I think it does amount to personal accountability and being brave in this space, Melíosa, and standing up for what we know is the right thing to do. And also with a mind to your fiduciary duty that, yes, it might mean some short-term pain, but you have a sustainable business for the long term and an economic model that transfers in the next 10 and 20 years, a legacy that you're leaving behind. So those are some of my views, and a very diligent lady at the front has told us we have 5 minutes.
Oh, so, very, very, very good. Okay, I thought we'd just
I know, you're only starting.
Okay.
Yeah. You and I are dangerous when we get started.
I know we are. Just a quick question. So I've said I'm financial services, and I know this is hard. We now have obviously a big, huge financial services centre here in Ireland. And just a little over 30 years ago, a group of people set about setting it up. And actually they were laughed at too. Yeah. And look what we have now. So I wonder, are we at that moment? Is there more that Ireland can be doing?
Oh, definitely.
Please talk to me about that.
I mean, I'm so passionate about it. I think we have such a wonderful opportunity. We have a young and talented population, very educated, and we have an opportunity as a group of businesses and government and policy-led to become a global green economy, a shining light for everyone else. And I just really wish that we could do what you guys did for financial services, which again you were laughed at 20 years ago and look down the docks nowadays. And similarly, when David and Al and others sat together and were laughed at, these things are hard, But the benefit for the long run for our country could be incredible. There were people also that thought about the fact that we should be a tech hub. I bet they were kind of laughed at the time as well.
Yeah.
I think we have huge opportunity. You look at the resource we have. If you look at a global wind map, it's like striking oil, right? We should have tons of offshore. I'll give you a good example. When we were moving, we had a 50 gigawatt development pipeline at Brookfield, right? And we were moving capital around the world all the time. It doesn't take much to have some good policy and structures in place. One of the places that I always thought was very good for this was with the Dutch. You would bid in their auction and they'd have the grid ready for you. You'd plug in and you were going offshore. So it took a lot of risk out of it for you. And that, they also have some of their ports that are hydrogen ready already. So we need to get together like a thinking, a think group, a think tank, like you did back in the day and become that global green economy, because you will attract much more inward investment. And IDA also have a huge role to play here in terms of attracting that in. There's an enormous opportunity, and it is regrettable, but we shouldn't look to that we're not there already, because we could have made a killing in the last number of years if we were exporting loads of green energy across the pipes into Europe. Such is life, but it's still, the opportunity remains, and we should grab hold of it.
Yeah, and I'm convinced combining that opportunity set with all these young people who are coming forward with all of that energy, I'm convinced in 30 years' time we should be looking back saying, wow, was that, and I know there's lots of people doing lots of this. Yeah. I just think there's more we can do.
Absolutely.
Just another question for you before, tell me, and I love the call to action. What should we all do?
I would say again, be brave. Be brave. You're thinking about the future of all of your businesses, and yes, it's not easy, but there's someone else doing what you're doing. So for example, Carberry are doing some great stuff around net zero farms down in West Cork. I know, Al has his own regenerative farm and he's trying to do the same thing. There are people around the world like-minded in your industries. Get together, be brave, and do not allow the politicization of what is a very serious debate for our lifetime.
And I loved what you said when we were chatting. You said, all of us need to be the adults in the room.
Adults in the room, yes, yes, absolutely. In every facet of our lives nowadays, we lack facts, and people take positions that aren't tenable. And I've always prided myself and my fellow countrymen. We've always had really good, mature debate here. We continue to do so, and don't allow it in, would be my advice.
Ruth, thank you for talking to us.
Not at all, a pleasure. Thank you.